Ladies and gentlemen, good morning again. I would like to thank you all for your participation. So we are here for the session named Hybrid Threats in the Age of Uncertainty. I would like to start by thanking all the participants and all the panelists, all the speakers here for joining us today. And I am also feeling very honored today to moderate the first panel of the Stratcom Summit'23. As you all know, the Stratcom Summit, which has been organized third time this year, has achieved an international brand. And this year's theme is the global response to hybrid threats. And we attach too much importance to understanding and addressing the hybrid threats. Today with us, we have very valuable, distinguished panelists today with us. It is a pleasure for me to introduce them. As the time is passing very fastly and due to the delay of today, I don't want to spend too much time and make a pirate presentation, and just would like to share the floor with these distinguished panelists. First of all, it is a pleasure for me to introduce our first panelist, Carlos Galan. I would just briefly like to mention about his short biography. Mr. Galan is a lecturer at the Carlos III University of Madrid and Nebria University, renowned for his exceptional work in hybrid threats and disinformation, as well as offering consultancy to Spanish private and public entities in the field of digital law. Mr. Galan serves as a member of the Jean Monnet Chair of the European Union on Disinformation, with a specialization in hybrid threats, disinformation, privacy, cybersecurity, and cognitive warfare. So Mr. Galan brings a wealth of knowledge on our discussion, and would like to share the floor. The floor is yours, Mr. Galan. So what are the effects of disinformation, manipulation, and information disorder, and your basic, your fundamental perspective on the social cohesion and information disorders on it? Please.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay? Perfect. Can you see my presentation? Oh, not yet. I think not yet.
You can just click on that. This one. That's great.
Better this, yeah. First of all, I want to say thank you to the organization to give me the chance to stay with all of you. I never stayed in Turkey before, and I really appreciate the invitation to stay with all of you. I am going to talk about hybrid threats and exactly examples of how hybrid threats attack our democracies. It's important to understand that in the new age, the hybrid threats was one of the most important things for each country in the world to protect his citizens. And for understand this thing, before everything, we are going to talk about a little story. That story is about one small village in the northwest in French called La Gallia, and how one Roman emperor called Julius Caesar tried to contest that village. In that village was living the famous characters Asterix and Obelix, and Julius Caesar tried always to invade that village. They use the better soldiers that they can. They try to pay money for contest that place, and nothing of that things is with nothing of that kind of behavior can contest that village. One day, Julius Caesar are thinking how it's possible that that small village can be part of the entire of Roman Empire. How is it possible that just 100 of citizens can be part of the empire? And one day come to the emperor one person called Detritus, that in Spanish at least called, the meaning is little destruction, that say, I can contest that place. I can make that you can invade that city. How is it possible? You are only one man and our best soldiers can do it. Don't worry, I don't need to use only more that narratives, disinformation, and fake news. Detritus go to that village and only in a few weeks can provoke that all the citizens in that village making fighting between them. This is the only history and the Asterix Obelix that the emperor can win this fight, and without making any kind of violence attack. Only using the disinformation, only if you use the correct narratives in a correct ways, you can provoke that one country get out. Only using the narratives can provoke that the democracies have a real and huge problem. Hybrid threats have a lot of mechanisms and tools, military tools, economic tools, non-conventional troops, but one of the cheapest of that is the disinformation attacks. You only need one person in the correct moment that spread his narratives. And what happened, one of the things that in some countries are more easy and in some countries are more complicated. This is one graphic that shows, I'm from Spain, that shows, for example, in Spain, we have a very polarization country. There are also United States and other countries that have also that polarization. That in that kind of countries, the disinformation, the fake news, have more effective than the others. Fake news, disinformation, was a problem for the most of the countries of the world. The people are worried about fake news. We are going to show you, with you, one example, the healthy narratives of disinformation. These things that you can see in the screen are the most famous narratives about the COVID, disinformation narratives about COVID. If we analyze that graphic, we can see that a lot of people thinking that kind of fake news. And in some countries, for example, in the United States, have a huge impact. Probably you know a lot of disinformation narratives about COVID, any kind of that kind of disinformation narratives. We hear about everything. If we analyze who is the creator of that narratives, we can focus that the 65% of that narratives is created for only these 12 persons. We are going to share with you one of them, Robert Kennedy Jr. Robert Kennedy Jr. was the leader and chief editor of one media called Children's Health Defense that since 10 years ago spread a lot of disinformation about any kind of topics of health. Not only COVID things, they also spread narratives about the vaccines, the normal vaccines, how they put in his blog how to cure the cancer and another sickness. If you check that web, you can see how is his opinion about some topics. If we analyze a little bit more about that person, we can know that that person are supported, are having a lot of interview by the official media of, for example, Russia. They appear in a lot of media that is paying by the Kremlin for spread his narratives. And Robert Kennedy Jr. also spread a lot of narratives that later spread the Kremlin. Not only in his official outlets, he spread that narratives also in his complete ecosystem of propaganda. We need to know that the official outlets of the countries is not the only way that that country have for spread all his opinion, propaganda, point of view, and so on. And that is in that media in the point that, in my opinion, we need to focus. Not in the official outlets, we need to focus in the complete ecosystem. I'm going to finish. Now all the countries, European Union, have a huge and real problem. The people, the citizens of the European Union, doesn't believe in a classical media of in his country. The people have still believing a little bit in the media, but the percent of the people who believes in the media are year and year have low. And that's a huge problem if we don't believe that our media says and what we are going to believe. Thank you very much. You have my email, my LinkedIn. Thank you very much.
Mr. Gamal, thank you so much. Thank you very much. Particularly the visuals you have shared are very important. I found it very fruitfully, and I would like to thank for your insightful comments and your presentation. Pleasure. So if we have time, I will address all the participants. If they have a question, then we will address you, but we have a time limitation. Initially, I would like to apologize for it and thank for you. And it is an honor for me to introduce our next panelist, Mr. Gordon Akrap, who is currently serving as the Assistant Rector at the University of Defense and Security, Dr. Franco Tudman. And Mr. Akrap is a founder and president of Hibrit Warfare Research Institute and Zagreb Security Forum. His expertise in hybrids and modern and emerging security threats will undoubtedly shed light on our insights, and we attach too much importance, your valuable contributions. Mr. Akrap, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much, and I'm very pleased that I'm invited here, that I can be able to share some of my opinions and opinions of my colleagues from my institute. And thank you very much for organizing this excellent conference, because it is more important than ever that we are facing the challenges that are in front of our societies in order to increase the societal resilience. That's the most important thing for the security and safety of our future. What I would like to tell you that based on the different analyses made since the war of the Croatian Homeland War for Independence in the 90s and up to the second Russian aggression on Ukraine, we are pretty sure that we can say that most of the future conflicts and wars are going to be hybrid by nature, and that the first targets of these hybrid conflicts and wars are going to be key critical infrastructure. Most probably the energy, food and water production infrastructure, cyber information communication, and what is extremely important, identity questions. Not so many people realize and wanted to understand that, but identity is one of the crucial things that has to be developed in order to improve and build up the societal resilience. We saw it, for example, in the difference against the two Russian aggressions on Ukraine, comparing the results of the aggression 2014 and 2022. Also, what is most important thing is to notice that those hybrid threats are improved and planned or organized and significantly by the increased activities of the intelligence community, of intelligence gather collection, in order to prepare the attacker for the better results in the future. Relations between hybrid threats and Stratcom are very significant and very important. It's all about the influence to the decision-making process on the cognitive level, because knowing that from the experience from the intelligence, we know that we are fighting with information for information, against information, in same way and same time protecting our information. This is the crucial point and crucial thing that we have to do in developing our societal resilience abilities. Second thing, what we have to say, that Stratcom is an essential part of any influence operations that needs to be done and needs to be taken care if we want to build up our defense system. Otherwise, since we are talking about the disinformation, I would like to repeat the rules of the two disinformations that were developed based on our experience from the Croatian World of Independence and the activities in the West Balkan 6 countries, that those societies who accept disinformation as a true are going to accept all the negative consequences of this information as a true. Those disinformation will remain in the social knowledge and public knowledge, and it will be shape the information environment in a way that information attacker wants. And the societies and the states that are not able to recognize those disinformations are going to have a significant challenge in the future. Let me give you and show you in one example about the Russian and Serbian activities, malign activities against, for example, Montenegro. This is just one of the examples based on what is going on in the West Balkan 6 countries. Here you can see the list of the vectors of attack of the Russian and Serbian activities against the Montenegro in order to shape the national, religious, and social status and social activities in Montenegro in order to shape the political processes. We were quite able to, and very easily, to identify their targets, from the identity to the public knowledge and political processes, elections and census as the most important areas what they are trying to do and to shape it. And the results are very simple and very visible for in a short and a long term. For example, here you can see on this slide, green colors show you results of the opinion polls from 2018 and the blue one in 2020. You can see that significant increase of the religious commitment in the population in Montenegro just in a 2 years process time. Second charge is that shows us how deeply divided situation as the population in Montenegro is, because they are dividing between the belonging to the Serbian nation or Montenegrins. And the third one, it's important to show the trend how the society is changed due to the different activities that can be understood as hybrid threats for long time activities. What we need, what was able to be here today many times, we need to improve our defense system. We need to build up the trust between the population and the government institutions, because this is one of the most important things that we have to do in order to build up the resilience of society. No one is anymore allowed and can win the wars of the future wars anymore alone. And national activities integrated and on the whole of society approach, because hybrid threats are attacking whole of the society, and therefore the approach to defend against the hybrid threats needs to be also on the same level. We need to defend the whole of society things. And as much as we can, we have to use international community, friends and partners on the international level to build up our resilience. Also, private partnership with academia, with companies, it's important, because state cannot do anything anymore alone. We need, and government needs to support from all other segments of the society. Education, motivation, building a trust, building a cohesion is one of the most important things that has to be done. When we are talking about the Stratcom, there are some rules that has to be done and has to be set. First, you have to be the first one when you are trying to shape the information environment if you want to reach the information supremacy. If you are not the first one, then you have to be very fast in order to build up your resiliency, because you have to be the one who is going to make the trends. You want to be the one who is going to control the information and management process. You want to be the one who is going to control the time management, because if you want to influence the decision-making process, you can do it on the two things. First thing is content of the decisions, and second one is a time frame of the decisions when they are going to be done. If you are going to be able to influence both of them, you can say that you reach the position of the information superiority. When we are talking about the Stratcom, we have to stress that we have to be honest. All information that are part of this Stratcom need to be honest. No fake news, no disinformations are going to help you to survive and to fight in this context. When we are talking about the propaganda and disinformation, this is something else. Second thing, what is important are the humans. Humans are the most important factor in all of those network of the resilience, because humans can be the strongest, but humans can be the weakest link. Humans are most sensitive thing, and therefore, if you have a group of experts that are available to you 24/7, and if they know what are they doing, if you give them the freedom to think and to act, you might have a very, very good result. And therefore, as I said, information management, communication management, and time management in fighting the Stratcom and conducting the Stratcom is the most important thing. That will be enough for the beginning. Thank you very much, and once more, thank you for the invitation.
Mr. Akrap, thank you very much for this valuable speech. We totally and definitely agree with you. And the parameters you shared on the presentation, the creating resilience, collaboration, mutual understanding, and establishing mutual trust within the societies are key things. Actually, I believe that the theme of our Stratcom Summit overlaps with your presentations directly. Ladies and gentlemen, our next panelist, it is a privilege for me to introduce Rachel Talukder, our guest from Poland. Our next distinguished panelist, Mr. Talukder, serves as the managing director at the Polish Platform for Homeland Security, with an experience in leading international efforts to address hybrid threats such as Silopes projects. Mr. Talukder is also a member of EU HypeNet, a pan-European network to counter European hybrid threats. So we eagerly anticipate the insights Mr. Talukder will bring to the table. The floor is yours, Mr. Talukder. Please.
Thank you. I'm just trying, if I click one, then okay, it's coming there. Okay, I see there. All right, thank you. Good morning to everyone. Good morning or good afternoon. Thank you very much for inviting me, and big congratulations to the organizers of this event. I think it's a wonderful place. Of course, Istanbul is beautiful, and also thank you for bringing all us together, and that we have this opportunity to speak about this relevant topic. In this introduction part, I wanted to, and I will try to keep this 8 minutes as we should. In the introduction part, I just wanted to explain you that the Polish Platform for Homeland Security is an organization established by Polish police and 10 universities in 2005 to foster or to facilitate at that time the process of research and innovation in the area of security in Poland. And till that time, we became, I think, the national leader in this area. We are working in different domains related to security. And also since 2016, we are involved in a variety of European activities in the area of cybersecurity, cybercrime, disinformation, different kind of hybrid threats, but also radicalization, public spaces, counter UAVs, and all other which are related to security. And what was mentioned in the introduction part, we are also a member of the EU HypeNet network. It's a network of a variety of mostly European partners which are discussing together, working together on the issue of how to fight and mitigate the different kind of hybrid threats. So also for those who are interested, if you Google the EU HypeNet network, you will find there very, I think, relevant and interesting documents also connected to the European Center for Hybrid Threats, which is based in Helsinki, in Finland. When I was preparing for today's meeting, I was wondering, okay, which topics on which topics I should focus on, because as we all know, the hybrid threats, it's a so broad term, it's especially that, and also from Stratcom perspective, there's a question or discussion, it can be even academical discussion, which topics should be covered, but then I just change the approach, and I decided that I will share with you a few thoughts that I would like to share with you. Okay. From Polish perspective, I think it's also part of the name of this event, that it's a global challenge. And we all face that the disinformation, it's not a local issue. I mean, when I'm at the European meetings, when I think local, I mean national. In fact, here, when I was traveling here, I realized that from this perspective, when I think local, I mean European, because like here we are talking about the global perspective. And from Polish perspective to this global perspective, I wanted to give you these 3 examples that are really like the challenging for us as Polish. The first one, and unfortunately all of them are related to Russian activities and Russian disinformation campaigns, which we see a lot of in Africa and here in Middle East, in Asia, in South America, where we see how there's a process of depicting the Polish nation as a anti-Muslim, anti-Jewish, or anti-immigrants country or nation, which we just observe. It depends on the narrative. Different narratives or the case, different narratives are chosen. We also observe different disinformation campaigns which are encouraging migrants, for example, from Syria, to come to Belarus, to Minsk, and then travel through the Polish border to the EU, to Germany or to other EU countries. And we observed that there is a lot of disinformation in social media, encouraging that there is like marketing advertisements, encouraging migrants from different countries to go to Belarus and just cross the border, which is not true, and it's not easy. And we also observed the problem in Poland last year, especially during the winter, when even people were dying in the forest during the winter, and it was just not even disinformation on one side, but also misinformation to the people who suffered there a lot. And also what I wanted to bring here is a problem which also face, especially now in Poland, and it's related with Polish and Ukrainian relations, because we also observe that there are a lot of campaigns which are trying to antagonize Polish and Ukrainian nations. When after the Russian aggression on Ukraine, a lot of Polish people supported, I think it was 2 million refugees from Ukraine. It was an amazing movement, and that also amazing trust which was built between countries. And now we see that these disinformation campaigns are trying to destroy what we built through this disinformation campaigns. I know that the time is passing, so I will just go quick through the points, and maybe later on we'll have time to discuss it. That Stratcom should work as a inoculation. I mean, we should all somehow vaccinate for disinformation. We as a people, as a nations, as inhabitants. Of course, it's easy to say, difficult to implement it. That's the reason I wanted to highlight the education, which seems the most important one, like to educate us how to read the information, which is called the media literacy. And I also mentioned here on my slide that it's important to remember about all age groups. And when we think about education, it's of course education in schools. I think that Finland is doing a great job, and it's a great example. But it's also a lot of things to do in the area of critical thinking. And there's also what I wanted to highlight is the independent fact-checking organizations, which are, I think, the part of the core of this business, how to find this information, because it's really difficult to go through all this information as a regular people. So we need those who we can rely on, who are going through the information and are analyzing it. We need a global Stratcom. That's, I think, clear for everyone. That's a huge challenge how to do it. I also wanted to underline that this kind of events are so crucial, because we need a marketplace where we exchange the ideas, we talk, we discuss, We meet with different people with different opinions. And one more time, thank you for organizing this event. And at the end, I wanted to also to say that countering disinformation is of course, continuous process, and we need hybrid responses to hybrid threats, and that's really a complex issue which we fortunately can work on together. So thank you very much. Thank you one more time for inviting me.
Thank you, Mr. Talukder. Pleasure and welcome you again. Thanks a lot for your insightful comments and presentation. Now, ladies and gentlemen, our next panelist is Ellen Vassilina from France. Ms. Vassilina is a president and founder of Trocadero Forum Institute. And actually, Vassilina is European affairs professional with extensive experience leading operation projects and staff in public, private and non-profit organization in France and Europe. With a wealth of experience leading strategic communications, media and advocacy activities at the international level, Mr. Vassilina brings a unique and invaluable insight to our discussion. Floor is yours, please.
Teşekkürler. Özgür. Teşekkürler Erdem. It's very good for me to be back with you again. Mr. Altun, it's so good to see you. Thank you very much. Teşekkürler. I'm very happy to be in Istanbul, and I'm so grateful for the invitation to speak again with you and to be with you and talk about these very important subjects. It's so interesting that each of us have a different take on this subject, and I prepared some remarks and 3 main points, and then if we have time, maybe some remedies. All right, so strategic communication, as you know, is a prerequisite for combating hybrid threats, as comprises crisis communication, public relations, public diplomacy, civil preparedness, awareness, strengthening coordination in the fight against disinformation. And here are the 3 biggest challenges. The biggest challenges for governments and politicians is to inform their citizens and to maintain the trust of their citizens. The second challenge is for news organizations to be able to present true and verified facts from reliable, trustworthy sources. And finally, the third challenge is for young people today to distinguish between true and untrue news. But we have entered into a continual crisis mode where 2 war fronts have opened, and where we are watching wars live on every media available to us, where news organizations are showing us the horrors, very personal dramas that are beamed instantaneously across the globe in a split second, that previously only came to us by letters, written a week or more earlier. So how can we fight hybrid or asymmetric threats just like those of the same nature in military strategy? Let's look at some of these hybrid threats and see how we can counter them by deploying a communication strategy on 3 main levels. In preparing for this panel, I went back and looked at 2 books that I published about Ukraine, which no one was interested in France at the time, and it's entitled Ukraine, Prémisse de guerre froide en Europe, Ukraine, Premise of War, Cold War in Europe, published in December 2014. And the second book I sent to my editor on Monday preceding the terrorist attacks, November 13, 2015, a Friday, in Paris, France's 9/11, entitled La défense européenne face aux menaces, l'Europe est-elle prête pour son 11 septembre? In other words, European defense facing threats, is Europe ready for its 9/11? Referring to the NATO publication entitled Strategic Communications Hybrid Threat Toolkit, and based on a prospective study that I did for a confidential client in 2020, I will focus on 3 of these threats, which can impact a government at all its levels of power: diplomatic, information, military, and economic. In 2016, the European Commission published their framework on countering hybrid threats, describing the mixture of coercive and subversive activity, conventional and unconventional methods, i.e. diplomatic, military, economic, and technological, and can be used, as we've seen, in a coordinated manner by state or non-state actors to achieve specific objectives while remaining below the threshold of formally declared warfare. And I'm going to take your 3 themes but I'm going to change it. I'm going to put security first. Security, stability, and then solidarity. Security is one of the most, we'll start with security, sorry. One of the most serious threats that we are facing is undermining governance and state functions, and thereby undermining our political model of governance, and with it, our credibility, our values, and what we stand for. The most visible and known to the public, as reported in the newspapers in France and elsewhere, is a foreign power supporting, as we've seen, financially a political party. Corruption, present in every country, black market jobs, human trafficking, criminal networks, illegal immigration, tax evasions, which can, in various nefarious forms, amputate up to 25% of a nation's GDP. Finally, terrorism, to which I dedicate the second chapter of my book on European defense, as our 9/11 in Paris shocked us all to our core. What we are seeing now with the war in Israel and Gaza spills over into my third point, which is ethnically motivated acts, escalation of socio-political protests. Second point, stability. The second threat is decreasing public trust in government and politicians. Now, as my role as an assesseur titulaire, in other words, I was running a voting booth in my city, in France, has given me a unique window into the trust citizens have in their local and national government, and the politicians that represent them, as well as their willingness to come out and cast their vote. The presidential elections in France in 2022 ended in 28.04% abstentions and 8.6% blank votes. But the trend is toward rejection and abstention, particularly among young people. As we saw during the COVID pandemic, and it's been mentioned already here, our trust in the government, in the politicians surrounding the excessive restrictions of movement and the imposed vaccines, the laissez-passer to go to the grocery store, the shuttering of cultural institutions or even cultural aisles in the supermarkets eroded our trust in our politicians and the police who were policing us, allowing us to only go out a few hours a day or to stay in a radius of 2 kilometers from our home. And finally, the third point, solidarity. The third threat, is very vivid after the Hamas attack on Israel on October 7, which has resulted in agitating and polarizing religious, cultural, or ethnic differences, particularly vivid in France, with more than 1,500 anti-Semitic attacks since the war started on October 7. Le Monde, one of our biggest newspapers, compares this year with previous years, with 436 acts of this nature taking place in all of 2022, 974 in 2004, which holds the record of acts committed in the 21st century. Tags, posters, banners made up 50% of all acts counted. Threats and insult made up 22%. The apology of terrorism, 10%. Attack on property, 8%. Physical attacks, 2%. And these attacks have resulted in 571 arrests. We can also speak of Islamophobia acts, or the double standards, as we say in French, deux poids, deux mesures, of reporting anti-Muslim acts. The Interior Minister, Gérald Darmanin, has managed an opacity on his remarks, even though, according to the media outlet Mediapart, he is said to have met with some Muslim groups, but came away with a figure of perhaps 500 anti-Muslim acts that have been mixed with anti-religious acts. And there are a few examples that I can cite by the Observatory of Islamophobia and the CFCM, or the French Council of the Muslim Religion and Cult, who received 42 letters and insults, and with 14 mosques tagged and 17 letters of threats to mosques. And there are a few examples, October 8, October 20, November 1st, with different mosques being attacked, and then Stars of David set next to it. It is because that our politics, not only in France, are heading to the right, like in the Netherlands, where the anti-Islam populist Geert Wilders just won the election. So how do we resolve these problems? And I'll stop here because there's so much more to say, but what I would say is we're seeing a similar division between what was happening with the war, the Russian war in Ukraine, and now the Israeli war in Gaza. Society is becoming divided and polarized. Even with the Russia war in Ukraine, it was an attempt, I believe, to divide Europe and the support, as we just heard from our Polish colleague, the support for Ukraine. And now we're seeing it again in this war that's going on almost 45 days now. So I think I'll stop here, and then maybe if we get a chance, we'll talk about remedies. Thank you.
Ms. Masina, thank you very much for this fruitful speech and for your contributions, your invaluable outputs. Thanks a lot. Ladies and gentlemen, our panel is privileged with the last speaker, last panelist. Let me have Matthew Saltmarsh. Mr. Saltmarsh holds the esteemed position of Head of News and Media at UNHCR. So Mr. Saltmarsh will deepen our understanding regarding the impacts and the outcomes of disinformation, particularly on humanitarian sector. And we are eager to benefit from your insights. The stage is yours, Mr. Saltmarsh, please.
Well, thank you very much for inviting the UN Refugee Agency to this important and timely event. I'm going to run through some of the examples of misinformation, disinformation, and hate speech in the humanitarian sector, and then look at some of the initial steps that are being taken to try to address it. Our position, the UN's position, and we heard from Melissa Fleming this morning, is not to try to inhibit human nature, it's just to minimize the harm on those that we support. And we know that human rights challenges are aggravated by information disorder, that vulnerable people and minorities are targeted, and that humanitarian agencies are targeted as well. Some standards of human rights protections should be applied to online as well as offline conduct, the same standards we believe. That's protection of free speech, but also limiting damaging attacks. And of course, the enforcement of restrictions should be consistent and it should be transparent. Disinformation, we know, often thrives where human rights are constrained, where the public information is not robust, and where media quality, diversity, and independence is weak. Fragile environments, of course, are therefore a perfect breeding ground. And the risk in humanitarian contexts is that hate speech and disinformation goes undetected or unchallenged, with sometimes devastating consequences. The humanitarian space, of course, is only very slowly addressing the question of AI, which we all know can turbocharge dis and misinformation. In terms of the platforms, we believe it's important that the platforms align their moderation policies with international human rights laws and principles and work around potential tensions with local laws. These moderation policies, as we know, are often enforced very inconsistently with little transparency, and there's the question of who's doing the moderating. Is it a graduate from Harvard who's working in California, a Chinese graduate in Shanghai perhaps? Are they the right people to be moderating conversations in fragile environments? People, of course, in these fragile environments are tending to use less common languages or non-commercial languages, let's say, and that includes many displaced people, and these are the ones who are disproportionately affected by the harmful content. And there's insufficient investment from the platforms going into that. Put simply, it's not a profitable business model. In terms of looking at solutions, we believe that genuinely independent and diverse social media councils with accountability for moderation will be important, and also that tech companies need inputs from humanitarian organizations to understand the context and create formal partnerships with us. These can then lead to early warning systems, co-developing interventions to reduce viral misinformation, including culturally sensitive content moderation, watermarking around AI, and pre-bunking campaigns. This is getting verified information out in fragile situations, potentially before crises occur, and of course making these tools available to a range of different partners. We have the EU Digital Services Act, which has been an important attempt to lead the regulatory conversation. It took a long time, it's being tested at the moment, but we believe parts of it at least can serve as a model for other places. In terms of the impact on refugees themselves, ideological disinformation has led to discrimination and hatred against minorities, refugees, migrants, and other marginalized communities, generating ethnic or religious tensions, even violence, and certainly hampering solutions. We have a host of examples where displaced people, marginalized people have been targeted, human traffickers using social media networks, particularly in Central America, but also in this region, to try to lure people into migration with false promises of jobs at the end of it. We've had exploitation through social channels, Syrian refugees who were begging online, and the profits primarily were going to the platforms. We've heard about the situation with COVID, where disinformation meant that many affected people were very reluctant to go and get inoculations that were much needed. And on a larger scale, if we go back to 2018, with the Rohingya crisis, there was a systematic campaign of online hatred and abuse that led to actual violence on the ground and deaths. And that was an important moment for us as well, because the refugees themselves were sending a lot of information to us, to media as well. It was one of the first times when really that information was being spread so widely. And of course, humanitarian agencies themselves are very much impacted. The principles for humanitarian agencies, of course, are around neutrality, impartiality, and independence, but that's built on trust. And if reputation is tarnished due to misinformation, then trust is, of course, eroded, and funding and other forms of support can be impacted. We've seen a number of examples where rumors have spread very quickly, and this has impacted the ability of humanitarians to go and do their work, particularly in Africa with the Ebola outbreaks in 2014 and 2019, and there were direct attacks on humanitarians as a result. We've also seen the systematic attacks on the work of the White Helmets in this region during the Syria crisis. Save the Children in 2018 were themselves targeted by a disinformation campaign during which they were accused of colluding with human traffickers. And this, of course, impacted their operations. In Ethiopia last year, there were social media disinformation campaigns against the World Food Programme, WFP, and also directly against the Director General of the WHO, who was a native of Tigray. The ICRC in particular has been impacted by a number of attacks, particularly in the Ukraine crisis, where they were accused of forced evacuations. I won't dwell here on the situation in Gaza, as it's outside of UNHCR's mandate, and we haven't ourselves monitored it, except to say that the levels of mis and disinformation from a UN perspective are enormous. In terms of the media's role, I think it's still very important. We know that social media has no journalistic standards. Everyone gets a platform, and all voices are equally valid in a sense. Back in the past, news management had been relatively simple, using press releases, outreach, interviews, and so on. Of course, that still exists, and there is still a balanced media out there. But unfortunately, the media have been absolutely swamped with information and misinformation, and they've had to pivot to verification, which takes a lot of their resource. But also, of course, they're then accused of being biased, and attacks on journalists themselves have risen. And there's also an issue here between the global north and the global south in terms of resources. The newsrooms in the global north are much better resourced to cope with these issues. A recent study showed that in Pakistan, nearly no newsrooms had fact-checking guidelines and systems in place. So in terms of addressing the situation of rumors and misinformation, some work has happened, and I think the focus here is that local is very much core. When a community feels disempowered or a conflict depletes trust, people may be much more likely to turn to trusted but potentially inaccurate sources of information like friends, networks, families, and so on. In the last few years, a number of humanitarian actors have been working around rumor tracking mechanisms. These were pioneered by Internews back in 2014 around the Ebola outbreaks. And again, this is very much a community-based approach, working with a variety of stakeholders. You start by trying to understand the rumors, where the information is coming from. You then engage with trusted sources, hoping that they then themselves become communicators to spread that information. And then you work on communication channels, which have to be very much local, managing digital risk, monitoring, pre-bunking and debunking when it's possible, and then, of course, crisis responses as well. There's a number of examples of these around the world, one in Bangladesh called Flying News, where there's about a dozen partners who are involved at the moment. UNHCR ourselves, we have a 2-year digital protection project ongoing at the moment. This is funded by the EU's humanitarian arm, ECHO, and it's dedicated to helping us and our partners to develop a practical response. The strategies are being tested in 3 12-month field-based pilot projects in our operations. These are consultant-led pilots involving research, mapping, foresight, testing of new tools, training, capacity building, and coalition building at the local level to produce examples that can be used in global advocacy and with tech companies globally as well. Just a final word as I close. Upcoming in the middle of next month, we have in Geneva the Global Refugee Forum. This is a gathering of 3,000 interested parties to discuss solutions to refugee crises. And a part of this will be around hate speech and misinformation. There will be a multi-stakeholder pledge as part of this on digital protection. The goal is to scale up the number of practical inclusive activities to mitigate and help prevent the harmful impact of these practices on refugees, and it feeds into the broader United Nations goals around the Global Digital Compact and the Code of Conduct on information integrity and digital platforms that we heard about this morning. We're already seeing here positive signs of support from refugee-led organizations, some members of the tech sector, government, and civil society partners. So I do encourage you, if you're interested, to follow this. There is a side event at the forum, and it will be streamed. I'll close it there, and thank you, everyone, for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Saltmarsh. And ladies and gentlemen, I would like to express my gratitude. As I mentioned in the beginning of the panel, unfortunately, we won't be accepting any questions from the participants due to the time limitation. So on behalf of the Directorate of Communication, I express my apologies and would like to thank all these esteemed panelists for sharing their comments, for their speeches, their evaluations, which I feel that will be very enriching our understanding of hybrid threats. Thank you so much again, and thank you so much for the listeners for participating in the session. Thanks a lot.